Well, actually, I started out at Florida State. Uh,
Oh,
my choice of
heresy.
Florida State was not really based on academics, um, but that's another story. Uh, I went there for a year, and when some career choices that I thought I was going to make didn't pan out, I dropped out and actually went into service. Back in those days, we had a military obligation, so
Mhm,
I used that time wisely to
mhm,
sort of recenter myself. And I think I had some opportunities that really solidified my choice of marine science.
mhm,
My last duty station was on a buoy tender. I was in the Coast Guard,
mhm,
and we went on a long cruise. It was chasing a Navy special purpose buoy. We didn't really know what it did, but we were required to stay on station with it. Our captain, who I think was a marine scientist wannabe, arranged for us to have some gear on the ship that we should never have had. We had a bathythermograph, we had a plankton net, we had a microscope. This is a buoy tender. All we did was scrape barnacles off buoys and put new batteries in them and throw them over the side. But while we were on station with this buoy, we'd drag a plankton net, and he and I would sit on the fantail when I wasn't on duty and try to figure out what in the hell we were looking at. Just copepods and all kinds of bizarre critters. And
mhm,
so after I got off active duty, I went back to Florida State, um, decided to take on marine science, and they really didn't have much, not at the time.
mhm,
Miami had other courses, so it seemed kind of natural to transfer to Miami.
mhm,
I got there, the courses were good, and one of the first courses I took was from a guy by the name of Dave Evans. Um, he was a physiologist, a fish physiologist, and I proposed a directed study as an undergrad, working with small sharks, and it just cascaded from there. It led into a master's, it led into a PhD, and the rest is my history.
did anything in any of your graduate degrees involve sharks at all directly or?
Uh, as an undergraduate, I did some work on salt and water balance in nurse sharks, and then
Mhm.
parlayed that into a master's, contrasting salt and water balance in nurse sharks with Petamotrigon, these nasty little South American stingrays. Worst animal I've ever encountered. I have the
Why is
scars
that?
to prove it. Oh, uh, most encounters with a stingray are coincidental. You step on them, they don't come after you. Petamotrigon comes after you. They're a little bit like lemon sharks. Lemon sharks have the only thing on their mind is to try to kill the investigator. Well, Petamotrigon is much the same way. So, nasty
So
little
you were
animal.
stung a few times.
Yeah, more than a few.
Do you ever think to break off the spine at all?
Huh?
Do you ever think to break off the spine? Yeah, so, exactly. About the fifth or tenth time, it's like I think I'm going to break off these spines.
I think I'm going to wrap this study up.
Yeah, it made you go faster, I guess.
Oh, and so
So, a question for you in terms of like you're doing your undergrad, then you do your master's at Miami, then eventually you did your PhD at Miami. These days, that doesn't happen a lot. Was that a common practice to stay at Miami to do graduate work, all the way through, or was that just more of an opportunity? They had the best sort of program at the time.
That's a hard question. Point of fact, they didn't take people in that kind of a degree program. Sometimes you could get in for a master's, but my undergraduate work was clearly going to lead to something significant. We were one of the leading labs in the world at the time. Dave Evans was a pretty prominent figure, and we were working against a lab in France run by Jean Metz, looking at sodium and chloride and potassium and urea and water movement across fish gills. Using radioactively labeled ions to trace their movement. And it was at the leading edge. So parlaying that into a master's was just sort of pro forma.
Right.
The Graduate Admissions and Advisory Committee didn't have any trouble with that. It's a little bit trickier getting in for a PhD, but again, it was one of those programs that it needed answering, so off
Right.
we went.
Interesting.
So you've had quite a long love affair with nurse sharks, and going back to your grad days and stuff. I knew in later years they've been your shark, been your go-to shark. Um, so as you went along, you did your PhD and everything, and at some point you needed to actually get a job, job after you finished your graduate school. So how'd you happen to wind up in Michigan from Florida?
Well, as usual, that was a circuitous route. Um, I got hung up on teaching more than anything else, and Dade County had a marine science curriculum that was in kind of bad shape. I did some lecturing for some high schools while I was a grad student, had a chance to take a look at the curriculum, and then was actually offered a job out of graduate school to revise the marine science curriculum in Dade County. So I took that on. That worked for several years. And then I was offered the job as a director of a marine lab down in the Keys. That was also interesting. The problem with that is that it was all administrative. There was no teaching. And so I decided I'd leave that and get into teaching. Now, if we have any current students, postdocs or whatnot who are listening to the show, this will hurt them badly. When I decided to leave the Keys, I applied for 5 jobs. I put a circle on a map, center at Key West, radius of 1,000 miles, and vowed I wouldn't take a job south of that. I really wanted to leave the Keys. I sent 5 letters out and got 3 interviews. 2 of them were for tenure track, and 1 was a sabbatical replacement. That one happened to be at Albion. It was the first one, so I went to it. I got there on a Tuesday night. I called the chairman of the search committee, said I'm in town. And he said, well, your first meeting is in the morning at 8 o'clock at Robinson Hall. So I walked up to the room, knocked on the door, and went in the room. It was full of students. So I apologized, and they said, are you Dr. Carey? I said, yeah. They said, well, we're your interview committee. So the first group I saw at Albion was a group of students. So I was on my way from there to Southeastern Massachusetts University. Sandy Moss was there at the time. And I got as far as State College, spent the night, got a call from Albion, offered me the job. And I thought, if this is a college that'll lead with a group of students, it has that much confidence in its students, that's a place I want to be.